Hey guys, Mrs. Lacefield here. Today we are going to talk about how to write a fiction story. This week for Language Arts, that's what you're going to be doing. So, fiction stories are stories that are fake. That's how I always remember it. Fiction, fake, so they're not real, they're just made up, which is really fun because then you can be as creative as you want to be. So, for fiction stories, there will be certain elements that you'll need to look at, certain questions that you need to answer in order to make your story. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. First of all, you need to figure out who is in the story. So this week, I'm just having you have one character. If you want to add more, that's fine, but it's up to you. Okay, so for your one character, you need to come up with who it is. If it's a person, if it's an animal, if it's a car, if it's, I don't know, a country. I guess you could do a country too. But just who is the main character, right? So I did this once with my class, and when my class did it, they wanted the main character to be a penguin. Okay, so I'm gonna write penguin. Okay, so for the penguin, we had to come up with a name. I can't remember what the name was. It was something silly because when my class was doing, they made up silly names. And so just for ease, I'm gonna call him Bob. So Bob the penguin. Okay, so like I said, first thing you need to come up with is you need to up with the character, so who the story is about. Okay, then after that, you're going to figure out what the character wants. Okay, we're going to figure that out in just a second. But for most stories, if you look at it, there's the main character. The main character wants something. Okay, wants something really bad. And sometimes the story focuses just on what the character wants. Sometimes, if it's a longer story, like a book series, like let's say Harry Potter, it will have other things that happen to the character as well, right? That maybe doesn't focus as much on what the character wants. So, like for Harry Potter, a big part of the story is he wants his parents back, right? Because his parents were killed by Voldemort. So that's what the character wants. Also, he wants to learn how to become a wizard. So that's a big portion. Then at the end, he wants to help defeat Voldemort. Okay? So you can see that in a big, long story like that, there's different things that the character wants. If we look at something that's a little more um, like a shorter story, I guess, right? Let's say that we're looking at the story Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Okay, so we could say that the main character is Goldilocks, and what she wants, well, she wants a couple different things, but she basically, I could say, she wants to explore the house and see what she can get out of it, right? Because first she finds the porridge, she finds the chair, she finds the bed, all those different things. Okay, so we need to figure out what our character Bob the Penguin wants. And since it's a fiction story, we can make it as silly as we want. Okay, so we could say what Bob the Penguin wants. He wants, oh, we could say there's a treasure chest buried or down at the bottom of the ocean in a sunken ship. Okay, he wants treasure chest at, this little sign means at, the bottom of the ocean. I might need a bigger whiteboard than this. Okay, so that's what Bob the Penguin wants. Okay, but when we're looking at stories, it'd be kind of boring if we were like, okay, Bob the Penguin found out there's a treasure chest from a sunken ship down at the bottom of the ocean, so he swam down and got it at the end. Right? That's kind of a boring story. In stories, there's something that's holding the character back. Or maybe not holding the character back, but something that's preventing the character from getting what he or she, I guess, or you could say, or it wants, right? So, we need to figure out what is preventing Bob the Penguin from getting what he wants. And I'm saying he because Bob's usually a boy name, right? So, um, what is preventing the character from getting what he wants. Okay, I'm abbreviating. Sorry, incorrect English for that stuff, but that's okay. So we could look at this and we could say, okay, so Bob the Penguin wants to go and get the treasure chest at the bottom of the ocean, but what's preventing him from getting that treasure chest? So we could come up with a lot of different ideas, right? So we could say maybe it's that he can't swim. Maybe there's a giant squid that's protecting the treasure chest, right? Maybe it's at the other side of the world. Maybe, let's see, what's something else for a maybe? Oh, maybe the treasure chest is too heavy and he can't get it out, right? So I could have all these different things. I could come up with as crazy a thing as I want. Maybe the megalodon has swallowed the treasure chest, so it's in his stomach, right? So I would pick one of those. So what is preventing the main character from getting what he wants? I'm going to do the giant squid. So giant squid is guarding the treasure. Okay? So, let's look at this so far. This is my story so far. So we've got Bob the Penguin. Bob the Penguin one day found out that there is a treasure chest at the bottom of the ocean from a sunken ship, right? He had his buddy, the leopard seal. I know penguins and leopard seals aren't actually buddies in real life, but talked to him about it. He was like, "Hey, did you see this? This is amazing," right? And so Bob the Penguin's like, "Oh man, I could really, really use that treasure." Right? And maybe that's something to go into what he wants. Maybe he could use the treasure because I don't know, his family needs the money for something, right? To buy fish or something like that for dinner. I don't know. So Bob the Penguin goes to the treasure chest and runs into the giant squid. So the giant squid is guarding the treasure, chases Bob the Penguin off, right? We don't want to end the story there though, because stories, especially fiction stories, usually have a very, very good, um, I can't think of the right word, but it's basically like the way that it's written, where the hero, usually the main character of the story, goes through, it's called an arc. So it's the way that the hero progresses and problem solves. So we need to figure out what is he going to do to get past the giant squid. Okay? And if I had a longer whiteboard, I'd write it down here at the bottom, but I'm going to write it up at the top. So I need to erase Bob the Penguin. We can remember it's Bob the Penguin, right? So, what does he do? So for this, what does he do? I need to think about it. What are some things that he could do? And this is my thinking for problem solving. What could he do to get past the giant squid? Well, first thing that came to my mind is maybe he could have his buddy, that leopard seal, distract the giant squid, and then he comes around back and gets the treasure, right? And then he's like, oh, my talking's hard today. Oh, leopard seal friend, if you do this, I will give you some of the treasure too, right? So he could have that. Or maybe he's like, oh, I'm going to build this like armor. So even if the giant squid tries to attack me, I'm safe and I can go and get that treasure. Or maybe, and sometimes this happens in the story too, maybe the Bob the Penguin says, "Hey, I think it would be best if I went and talked to the giant squid and I found out what's going on and I help the giant squid with something and then he'll give me the treasure." Right? So something like that. So you need to think of different ideas of what the penguin could do or your character could do to solve the problem. Right? So for mine, I'm going to put what does he do? So gets leopard seal friend to help. I'm going to put to distract the squid. Okay. So, if that's what he does, then I need to think about, and I don't need to write it down right now, but I need to think about what happens when they go and do that, right? So I could say, okay, so he gets the leopard seal friend to distract the squid. The leopard seal, like, leads the squid away on this giant chase, and Bob the penguin sneaks in and gets the treasure chest, right? And I could say that it's successful. That's up to me to figure out how the ending is, right? Or I could say the giant squid sees what's happening and he comes back and tries to stop Bob the penguin. And then at that point, I'd have to figure out what happens next, right? The leopard seal friend. I would assume, because the leopard seal seems like he's a pretty good friend, right? I would assume that he would come and he would help Bob. And eventually they would get the treasure and save Bob's family, right? Or I could figure out other things as well. So, what you're going to do this week is you are going to fill out, answer these questions for your story that you're going to write, and then you're going to write the story. Okay? And what I mean by write the story is after you fill this stuff out, I don't want you to just copy and paste what you put on here, right? Because that'd be kind of boring. For instance, my first one said Bob the Penguin. So I could say, Bob the Penguin found a treasure chest at the bottom of the ocean, giant squids guarding it, and so he gets the leopard seal friend to distract the squid. That wasn't a very exciting story, right? The end. That's it. Not very exciting at all. So, what I want to do is I want to write it and think about how you've read stories. Even if they're picture books, right? So they're a little bit shorter. Stories are still written in a way so that you can imagine what's happening. And the great thing about picture books is you also have pictures to help you imagine what's happening as well, right? So I want to make it exciting. I want to say what happens. So I would say something like, once upon a time, there was a penguin named Bob. And then I would explain why he needs the treasure chest, right? He doesn't want it just so he can have a fancy gold necklace. Well, maybe he does. But in the story that I came up with, I would say, okay, once upon a time, there was a penguin named Bob. And his family was having a really hard time and needed to get some money to buy fish so they could eat. So one day, when Bob was trying to figure out how to get his family more money, his friend, let's see, what should the leopard seal's name be? Let's have the leopard seal be a girl, because we have Bob being a boy, right? Betty. Sure, we have Bob and Betty. So Betty the leopard seal, who is Bob's best friend, came over and was like, Bob, guess what I found? And Bob goes, you know what? I have a lot of stuff that I'm dealing with right now. And Betty's like, no, 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 no. Listen, listen. This is really cool. I found at the bottom of the ocean a treasure chest from a sunken ship. And Bob's like, well, why didn't you tell me earlier? This is perfect. This will solve my problem. Right? And Betty goes, oh, but there's a slight problem with this. There's a giant squid that's actually guarding this treasure. And Bob goes, well, let's go look at it real quick. So swim down to the bottom of the ocean. They look at the ship, and sure enough, as soon as they get close enough, they see these giant tentacles coming out of the ship with these huge suction cups, and they know that that giant squid is about 20 times bigger than both of them put together. It's huge. And they're both kind of afraid of giant squids. Giant squids can be very scary. And they're thinking, oh, maybe that's probably what caused this ship to sink, right? This giant squid, now it's guarding the treasure all for itself. So they go back up to land and they chat and they're figuring out what they can do. And Bob came up with the idea that maybe Betty, since she's a quick swimmer, could go down there, get the giant squid's attention, and lead the giant squid away, right? So they go back down there, and Bob hides behind this rock on the seafloor as he watches Betty go and get the squid's attention. It took her a couple minutes, but eventually, after slapping one of its tentacles with her fins, she gets the squid's attention. The squid comes out of the shipwreck, and it's even bigger than they thought. And Betty goes, oh no, and swims away as fast as she can, with the squid following right behind. Well, Bob knows that he only has a little bit of time left, so he swims into the ship and he sees the treasure chest, and it's just overflowing with rubies and gems and coins. There's even a crown there, which he puts right on because he thinks that would be awesome to wear. So he grabs the side of the treasure chest. He starts yanking it, and slowly it's moving across the floor. And then he realizes, this is too heavy for me to carry the whole thing all the way up to the surface by myself. But if I can get behind that rock and hide it, we could get it. So he keeps yanking, yanking, yanking. And when he gets it out of the ship, he looks around and he can see the squid getting closer and closer and closer to his friend Betty. So he pulls the treasure chest all the way back behind the rock, and he sees the squid is almost ready to grab his best friend. And he's going, oh no, I'm going to lose my best friend because I was trying to get this treasure. So he swims away from the rock and he whistles. I don't know if he can actually whistle underwater, but in this story he does because it's fiction. I can make anything happen I want. So he whistles at the squid to get its attention. And it's like, hey, squid, come back over here. So the squid chases Bob. Bob's a slower swimmer, so the squid almost gets him. Then Betty does the same thing. Betty comes over, distracts the squid, and they keep doing that back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until the squid is confused and exhausted and dizzy from looking back and forth to each of them. So the squid eventually just gives up and goes back in the ship to rest. At that point, Betty and Bob meet up, and Bob's like, hey, I've got the treasure. It's back here behind this rock. Will you help me carry it back up to the surface? And Betty goes, of course. She's a good friend. So they grab the treasure chest, bring it back up onto land, and then they split it evenly between the two of them. And Bob's family is able to have as much fish as they can eat. The end. So that's my story, right? You can clearly see how I followed that storyline and then I told the story of what happened and how he solved the problems. That's what I want you to do. Come up with a story, answer the questions, and then write it in detail so I could see how they solve the problems. Hope you enjoyed this story. Hope you enjoyed learning how to create a fiction story. And I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. Okay, see you later.